over the past couple of days, we've done a lot of epic stuff. We've seen ghost towns, we visited Tombstone, we went to Roswell, New Mexico. I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm starting to feel a little tired. But you know what? We can't rest now. Rain or shine, there's no way we can stop now. We've got some exploring to do. Because just up the road here is one of the wildest parts of the old Wild West. Welcome to Lincoln, New Mexico. Walking around this place today, Lincoln, New Mexico is one of the quietest, sleepiest little towns I've ever been in. It's hard to believe that from the 1850s into the 1880s, this was one of the most violent places in the Old West. First of all, just a little ways down the road, you had an old army fort that was established pretty much to drive the natives out of the area. And in this part of New Mexico, that conflict between the army and the natives was particularly brutal. Then the area started being sort of colonized by mostly Spanish-speaking settlers. This, of course, caused conflicts between the settlers and the local Apaches, and so the townies built this thing. This is called the Torreon, and this is where all the townies would hole up whenever there were raids by the Apaches. That's how crazy life out here was, that the townspeople had to build themselves a round tower that they could hide inside of because of the violence. See these holes in the wall? These right here were little gun ports. Dude, men, women, children, I cannot imagine being crammed in here with everyone from your town. Eventually, and honestly somewhat rather tragically, the army got the upper hand in the area, and as more Spanish and Anglo settlers began flooding into the region, a couple of ex-soldiers from Fort Stanton up the road, who had become successful if somewhat corrupt businessmen, decided to move their operations here to Lincoln and build this. It was known as the House, and you can see why. This was a store, a Masonic lodge, pretty much the headquarters for all business in the region. The main partner in this enterprise was a guy by the name of L.G. Murphy. Because this was the only place for, miles around where anyone could buy anything, he could pretty much charge whatever he wanted, so everybody in this area became indebted to him, and he became a pretty powerful guy with a lot of political connections. Meanwhile, this area stayed pretty dang violent. There was something called the Horror War, where some Texas outlaws came through and shot up the town, killed a whole bunch of people, and had to be driven out. And just when everything seemed peaceful and good old Murphy here was running the show, a British guy by the name of John J. Tunstall came to town and decided he was gonna break the monopoly and make 50 cents on every dollar made in this county, and opened up his own store in Lincoln, the Tunstall store. I know, it all sounds so complicated and I am really simplifying this, but basically Tunstall opening up this store set himself up against Murphy and his new partner J.J. Dolan, who was actually taking over the business, and ignited something called the Lincoln County War. Now you had two factions in town fighting for control of the area, the Murphy-Dolan boys and, of course, the Tunstall guys. Each side had a lot of money, a lot of guys working for them, a lot of guns. And when the Murphy-Dolan gang found a legal way to send Sheriff Brady out here to seize John Tunstall's property, things got out of hand. And instead of arresting him and seizing his property, Sheriff Brady's posse ended up murdering him. Well, obviously, Tunstall's men weren't too happy about this. And one of those men who actually witnessed the murder was none other than the legendary Billy the Kid. Billy and his friends swore revenge, and one day they were over here at the Tunstall store, and they spied Sheriff Brady and some of his guys walking across the street. Sadly for Brady, this was the moment his watch was ended, and Billy the Kid and his buddies, known as the Regulators, basically started becoming outlaws. Like a lot of other legendary fights in the Old West, it wasn't really clear at first whose side the law was on. But one thing's for sure, shooting the sheriff did not help the Regulators' side. There were a whole lot of other conflicts, but each side geared up for war, and eventually both factions ended up back here in Lincoln with about 30 to 50 men each, and waged a 5-day gun battle all over this town. I am really trying to simplify everything for time's sake, but basically at the end of the 5 days, the Murphy-Dolan boys had the upper hand, and Billy the Kid and most of the Regulators ended up trapped inside of John Tunstall's partner's house, which used to stand right about here, but during the battle was somehow set on fire while all those guys were still inside. By now, the army had showed up in town, and because of their political connections, were mostly taking the Murphy-Dolan side, and things did not look good for Alexander McSween, who was the leader of the Regulators. His house was burning down, the army's outside, people are shooting guns. What else can you do but try to make a daring escape? So Billy the Kid and his friends came out the side door, shot off some guns, basically trying to create a huge distraction while they escaped down that way. Billy and some of the Regulators made their escape, but unfortunately for Alexander McSween, he never made it out alive. And Alexander McSween was buried here right next to his old partner John Tunstall, right behind the old Tunstall store where they had hoped to create a business empire and sadly had failed. Now this is when Billy the Kid Kid basically assumed the leadership role with the regulators. There were a whole bunch of other gunfights and killings and crazy stuff going on. By now, with all the murders and shootings and basically anarchy down here, the army was involved, the governor was getting involved. Eventually, things were so confused and there had been so many killings that the governor had to offer basically an amnesty for everyone involved in the Lincoln County War. Everyone, that is, except for Billy the Kid. Even though he was promised amnesty by Governor Lew Wallace, it never came about. And even though other people had been involved who did get pardoned, Billy the Kid got stuck with all the blame for Sheriff Brady's murder. After Billy the Kid hightailed it out of here because he was now an outlaw, Sheriff Pat Garrett was sent to go bring him back. And after he was caught and eventually taken to Old Messiah, where we were a couple of days ago, Billy the Kid was sentenced to hang for the murder of Sheriff Brady. After a long time on the run, Billy the Kid was brought back to Lincoln, this time to hang. By now, he was something of a folk hero to all these people around here who didn't like the Murphy side. I mean, the whole place was split between the two camps. And apparently, Billy was a genuinely likable guy. Everybody was sad that Billy Bonney, as he was known in town, was going to be executed, and they brought him back here to the old house, which had now become the Lincoln County Courthouse, and chained him to the floor upstairs, waiting to be hung. Now, Billy was a pretty wild and crazy guy, and he had escaped from the law before, so there was no way he wanted to wait around just to be hung. That's when he knew he needed to escape. And inside this building, the old Murphy Dolan store, the house that had now become the Lincoln County Courthouse, William Bonney would make the most daring escape of his career, the one that would make him famous as the outlaw Billy the Kid. Now, Pat Garrett had dragged Billy the Kid all over the state to get him tried, and apparently that whole time, one of his deputies, a guy by the name of Bob Ollinger, who loved the Murphy Dolan faction and hated Billy the Kid, had been picking on him and picking on him and picking on him. So when Bob Ollinger took some other guys over here to the Wortley Hotel, which is literally just a couple of yards away, to get a hot meal, Billy saw his chance to escape. So this is where Billy was. Well, there he still is. This is where it all went down. Inside the old courthouse. Up the stairs. Actually, inside the room that was also the courthouse, they kept Billy the Kid chained up right over here in this corner. Bob Ollinger left here to go to the hotel and get his meal, and left Billy the Kid sitting here playing cards with his deputy, J.W. Bell. Look at that. These are Billy the Kid's actual leg irons. That's the craziest part of this story, is that he was all chained up and shackled, and yet he managed to escape. After Bob Ollinger left, Billy the Kid told J.W. Bell that he needed to use the outhouse. Can't really say no to that. I mean, you gotta go when you gotta go. So Billy went to the privy, and on his way back, coming up the stairs, somehow, someway, Billy the Kid got a hold of a pistol, shot J.W. Bell, made his way into the next room over here, grabbed Bob Ollinger's prize shotgun, then raced back through the rooms over to the window. And as Bob Ollinger heard the shots and started racing back towards the courthouse, Billy the Kid was waiting for him right here, and according to legend, shouted down, "Hi, Bob," and blasted him with his own gun. Then he casually made his way downstairs, had someone help him out of his shackles, and fled town. It's one of the craziest real-life escapes in history. This is the moment where he stopped being William Bonney, which was already an alias, and became the full-fledged legend, Billy the Kid. The craziest part is, to this day, nobody knows exactly how he did it. Some people think Billy's friends in town hid the pistol in the outhouse. Pat Garrett thought that Billy the Kid ran up the stairs, ran into the armory, grabbed a pistol, and then went around the corner and shot Bell on the staircase. But a lot of people think that Billy the Kid was coming up the stairs, beat J.W. Bell with his own cuffs, grabbed his gun, and shot him with his own pistol. Either way, this is a crazy place. This is the spot. This is the very stairway where Billy the Kid shot J.W. Bell. As a matter of fact, down there, all the way at the bottom of the stairs down here, you can see this. Legend says that this is the very bullet hole put into the wall when Billy the Kid shot Bell. That might be Billy the Kid's bullet hole. Whoa, I wonder who took the Billy bullet out. That's one fine looking hole. I particularly like the shape of the plexiglass they used to preserve it. I'm just putting myself in the kid's shoes. I mean, you're all chained up, you're shackled, you're going up these stairs here. If you're in front of your guard, it does make sense that you'd be able to turn around, hit him in the head or something, take his own gun, and bang! Then Bell's running outside. Billy the Kid turns the corner, grabs the shotgun. Of course, people outside heard the shot, so he runs back into the little room in the corner, leans out of this very window, and shoots Marshal Ollinger with his own gun. That is crazy. Look right down there. See that white stone? That is where Bob Ollinger died. Just imagine being Bob Ollinger. You run from the hotel, which was right over there, because you heard the shots. You run all the way over here, back to the old courthouse, and right when you get over here, underneath this window, you see the face of Billy the Kid up there. Hi, Bob. Now, Billy the Kid fans see Bob Ollinger as one of the bad guys. So to them, Bob Ollinger got what he deserved. But it's important to note that not everybody agrees about that. A lot of people living in this area today have families stretching all the way back to Lincoln of that time. And people are still very divided whether or not Billy the Kid was a good guy or a bad guy. Most people nowadays see it as a little bit of both on either side. But one thing's for sure, it's a crazy story. It's a very weird thing to be standing in the exact place where Billy the Kid made one of the most daring escapes in Old West or any history, especially since, like I said, no one knows to this day exactly how he did it. Pretty crazy being inside this historic building. Not just for the Billy the Kid stuff. I mean, we're inside the Murphy Dolan store. Or look in here. This was the Masonic Hall I was telling you about upstairs. A lot of these rooms were used for offices and all kinds of different stuff. They even had a billiard hall in here. Only the main room downstairs was actually the store. But what a crazy history for any building. Now, I know old Western stuff isn't nearly as popular today as it used to be. I mean, the kids aren't exactly lining up around the block to watch Westerns. I myself used to think boring, but the more that I find out about these stories, especially the real-life versions of the stories and not just the movie versions, the more I understand why Western novels and movies dominated for so long. I mean, these stories are crazy. Nothing like this goes on in modern-day United States. It's a lot more clear-cut now who the good guys and the bad guys are, you know what I mean? I almost didn't come out here today, but my friend George is a huge Billy the Kid fan. I haven't got super deep into it. I was never really interested in Billy the Kid until the last year or so. But I gotta say, I'm glad I came out here. Alright, now I've checked out the inside of the Murphy Dolan store, so it's time to pay a visit to the other side. Let's check out the inside of the Tunstall store, which is not only still here in immaculate condition, but also houses the town's modern post office. Whoa, what the heck? Look at how perfectly preserved this is. This is the Tunstall store today, and this is the Tunstall store back in the day. I mean, it looks virtually identical. If you're a Billy the Kid fan or a fan of the movie Young Guns, just think, this is where Billy the Kid and the Regulators would have hung out all the time. What's really crazy about this place is it has these huge, thick adobe walls. It's virtually bulletproof. Yeah, in the 5-Day War, McSween and the Regulators holed up in other places and not in here. Kind of strange if you ask me. We got a lot of strange stuff on exhibit in the old Tunstall store. Oh, and by the way, when they lost the Lincoln County War, the Tunstalls and the Regulators and whatnot, J.J. Dolan, who had lost his store and it became the old county courthouse, took over this building and had his store in here, so really he won the war. Although the vast majority of people really don't know who he is. But Billy the Kid remains a legend to this very day. Ooh, they got a collection of famous people's cowboy boots, including Richard Farnsworth. Wow, he was Matthew in Anne of Green Gables. He was also in Bonanza, but Anne of Green Gables. Most people consider John Tunstall the good guy. But let's not forget he said he wanted to make 50 cents on every dollar in this county. He was just as much of a ruthless businessman as Murphy and Dolan. And he had a whole group of hired guns to back him up. He was probably a little naive. Definitely a sympathetic character in the story. And it's too bad what happened to him. There he is right there. John Tunstall. Oh, I've never heard this part of the story before. Do you know how Billy the Kid and his buddy shot Sheriff Brady in retaliation for the murder of Tunstall? Well, supposedly, according to legend, he was shot through the leg during that. And they sawed a hole in the floor of old Tunstall's living quarters. And even though they tracked the blood in here, they couldn't find Billy the Kid. I have never heard this story before this moment. It's not in any of the books that I read. But I guess they found a place where the floor was sawed through. So who knows? Maybe it's true. Wow, look at the old wallpaper on the walls, huh? This was where Tunstall lived. I never knew that. It's crazy to think that a real-life legend, none other than Billy the Kid, walked around on these very floors. He may have even touched this very counter in this very spot. It smells like history. Alright, well, it's time to leave the Tunstall store. And time for us to leave Lincoln. Of course, right when the sun comes out. Oh well, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Alright. Goodbye, John Tunstall.
Regulators, saddle up.
All right, we may have left Lincoln, but I don't think we're quite done with Billy the Kid yet. However, we've got a lot more driving to do, and it's a long, long drive through the most middle-of-nowhere part of the country I've ever seen. Look at this. There's no one around for miles, maybe tens of miles, dozens of miles, dozens of threes of miles. Yet after Billy the Kid's big escape, this is the way he headed, and not by car, on horseback. This is taking me hours by car. I can't even imagine doing it on a horse. Boy, you'd be saddle sore. Ugh. After roaming through all that nowhere, eventually Billy the Kid ended up here, many, many miles north at what used to be old Fort Sumner. At one time, there was a U.S. Army fort here, although repeated flooding from the Pecos River has destroyed almost all traces of what used to be the big fort. By the time Billy the Kid rode up here, it had been privately purchased and wasn't an army fort anymore. And he had friends living here, but it still blows my mind that he rode all those miles north to see his friends instead of trying to escape south to Old Mexico. Apparently, Pat Garrett had a pretty good idea of where the kid was going. And only 2.5 months or so after Billy the Kid escaped jail in Lincoln, Pat Garrett caught up with Billy the Kid up here in Fort Sumner. And as Billy the Kid was tiptoeing around on his stocking feet outside some of the old fort buildings, he noticed a couple of strangers outside, so he backed into his friend Pete Maxwell's house, where unfortunately for Billy, Pat Garrett was sitting inside asking about him. And according to most versions of the story, as Billy came inside and said, "¿Quién es?" or in English, "Who is it?" Pete Maxwell told Pat Garrett, "There he is." And Pat Garrett, not taking any chances, just out there where Pete Maxwell's house used to be, fired on an unsuspecting Billy the Kid. It's a sad story. Billy was only maybe 20, maybe 21 years old. He was a likable guy. People up here were really upset when he was killed. And the locals, to whom Billy was not just a friend, but also kind of a folk hero, laid him to rest over here in what was the old post cemetery. And now here we've come, the end of the trail. This quiet graveyard here, the last resting place of Billy the Kid. Here, Billy the Kid was laid to rest beside two of his best friends, Tom O'Folliard and Charlie Beaudry, who had both been laid to rest here earlier. So in the end, Billy the Kid, who had spent most of his life wandering from place to place without a real home, was laid to rest beside two of his fellow regulators. I mean, none of these guys were angels. They were cattle rustlers at some times, they were killers, but they all died very, very young. A couple of interesting things about this grave. For one thing, although this is the old post cemetery, you'll notice there aren't many tombstones here, and that's because that Pecos River flooding washed away many of the old grave markers, totally messed everything up here. So while this is definitely the cemetery where they laid Billy the Kid to rest, this actual spot is really just a best guess. Another interesting thing, you'll notice this old tombstone of Billy the Kid's is now shackled to the ground at his feet. That's because in 1951, somebody stole Billy the Kid's tombstone, and it wasn't found until 26 years later in somebody's backyard in Texas. Then just 5 years later, it was stolen again and recovered a couple days later in Huntington Beach, California, not too far from where I live. So when it finally came back here, they weren't going to take any more chances. Wow, it's an awfully touching place, especially with that tombstone there. Three misfits who came to the end of their wandering together, buried side by side as pals. But I can't help but notice that in addition to throwing some coins on the grave, people have left these regulators plenty of ammunition. Look at all those bullets down there. Ooh, and some of that, a lot of it, is live ammunition. Well, wherever Billy the Kid is, I hope he doesn't need that. Wow, this is a very sad place, and not just because it's Billy the Kid's grave. Even before that happened, Fort Sumner was kind of a terribly horrible place. Thousands of Native Americans were forced to walk to this fort, forced from their homelands, and basically imprisoned here for a long time. It's one of history's terrible crimes, terrible shames. I love this country, but there's no doubt that we haven't always been angels either. Don't get me wrong, Billy the Kid's grave is honestly very sad, very tragic, but if you read even a little bit about what else happened here, this is what makes me want to cry. Alright, it's time to say adios to the grave of Billy the Kid, because just a few miles away in the modern town of Fort Sumner, they've got the Billy the Kid Museum, owned and operated by the same family since the 1950s. Billy may be dead and gone, but the legend is still alive. As you can imagine, these people have been collecting Billy the Kid stuff for a long time. So they've got photographs of Billy the Kid, newspaper articles about Billy the Kid, artifacts from the old Fort Sumner, including this old kettle. Lots of items were purchased from descendants of people who knew Billy, even pots that cooked food eaten by Billy himself. The photos are interesting, especially the one that's supposed to show Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Plus, they also have that recently infamous croquet photo. More like Pat Garrett. But the coolest part is the stuff in the Billy the Kid room, where supposedly you can see Billy the Kid's actual rifle. Wow, supposedly Billy the Kid gave this rifle to his buddy to hold on to just a couple of months before he died. A Billy the Kid rifle. Much more believably, they also have the actual curtains hung over the doorway and in the room where he was shot, and even the very door to the room itself. But the bullet holes are from later. This collection is mind-blowingly impressive. I had no idea how huge this place would be. There's an endless amount of authentic old Western stuff in here, and this collection keeps on growing. Dude, there's an unbelievable amount of stuff and an unbelievable amount of information in here. This place is one of the coolest Old West museums of any kind I have ever visited. But what's really cool is in addition to all the other Old West and Billy the Kid stuff here, they've also got Billy the Kid's grave. Wait a minute, what? Oh, I was gonna say, Billy the Kid doesn't need two graves and two tombstones on each grave. See, the real grave of Billy the Kid isn't fun, but this one's just a replica, so this is the fun grave. Oh, you can actually read this one, The Boy Bandit King. He died as he had lived. You know what's really interesting about Billy the Kid? He was known in Lincoln County as Billy Bonney, or William H. Bonney, but his real birth name was Henry McCarty. Then later he went by Henry Antrim, or the Kid Antrim, and then William H. Bonney. Not only do we not know exactly when he was born, It seems like even his name is up for grabs. And that's not even mentioning all the conspiracy theories that say Billy the Kid wasn't shot and killed that night, and that he got away. But since everyone around here knew Billy the Kid really well and all kind of went out and buried him, I'm gonna go ahead and use Occam's razor and say Billy the Kid is probably buried right there. Well, over there, you know. Man, this place is so cool. Honestly, it deserves a video episode all to itself. So if I'm ever back this way, I am definitely gonna cover this more. What I really like about this place is it has things like this old jail cell that has real bars, but there's a sign in here that lets you know where they came from and that the rest of this jail has nothing to do with Billy the Kid. It's just a prop. An honest tourist attraction. How about that, Billy? Seriously, this place is gigantic. There's so much more stuff in here than I was expecting there to be. I'm trying not to spoil it for a future visit. Don't look. Focus on Billy. Focus on Billy. Oh, finally. The exit. The inside of the museum is pretty fun, especially if those really were Billy's pots and Billy's rifle. And the gift shop is full of fun Billy swag too. The inside of this museum is good, especially this statue here. It's so handsome. Oh, Billy! But the outside has also got some pretty fantastic stuff. And not just artifacts, but look at all these. Old-fashioned hand-painted signs. Whoa, looks like Billy was handy with the ladies. I just love all this stuff. Feels very old-school tourist attraction-y. Because that's basically exactly what it is. I mean, this museum dates from the 1950s. Still in the same family's hands. There's a whole ton of epic stuff inside. But last but not least, they got a couple of rad fun pick opportunities. Oh, I love me a good stagecoach fun pick. What a fun one. And look at this right over here. After you've gotten to know Billy, they even let you become Billy. Look, Ma, I'm an outlaw. Now that's a fun pick. Just don't let Pat Garrett catch you looking like that. Well, all right, guys. I fulfilled my promise to my friend George. I've honestly learned a whole lot about Billy the Kid. And it's funny because I wasn't super into the story before, but now that I've been to all these places, I'm like really curious. No wonder all those people are interested in this story. Anyway, we've walked in the footsteps and learned a lot about New Mexico's most notorious Wild West legendary outlaw. We came, we saw, we Billy. And now it's time for another long drive, still northward. From Fort Sumner all the way back up to my favorite highway of all time. We're back on Route 66. Oh, I love this road. Feels like coming home. Especially when I'm at one of my favorite motels on all of Route 66, the Roadrunner Lodge. Oh, I love the owners here. I love the staff here. I love the themed 1960s rooms here. I've slept here many times, so this really feels like home. And now that I've come home, I can sleep well. It's gonna be nice to go to sleep. Too bad Julio missed a great trip today because he had to hang out with one of his girlfriends. You old softy, you. All right, see you guys later on Route 66. I love this place. Everything's so sparkling clean, wonderfully retro, sanitized for our protection. There's free bags everywhere, amazing vintage stuff, retro-inspired furniture that I'm really jealous of. Ooh, champagne. Don't mind if I do. Oh, this room has Battleship. I don't even know what the heck this is. They have their own radio station on the property, complete with vintage commercials, free moon pies. Ooh, and this is new, some reading material. Hey, wait a minute. Who's this guy mentioned in the corner? This is the greatest road trip magazine I've ever been subscribed to, and look who they featured in issue number 2. Ooh, look, it's me. Ooh, it's me and Abraham Lincoln. Ooh, it's me and the Rattlesnake Museum. It's me and this thing. It's me with my thumb. Look at that, it says free on it. The Roadrunner's giving me a free magazine. What do you think about that, Julio? Want to read? I'm just teasing you, buddy. I'm actually really glad you're here. Ever since I left Roswell, I just had this weird feeling that I'm not alone. Something's been following me. It's probably nothing. Let's put a quarter into the magic fingers over here and get some shut-eye. All right. Good night, guys. Sleep well. Oh, shit, the weirdest dream, Julio. Go to bed. What are you doing? You're creeping me out. Sleep well.